You can use your freedom in a wrong way to indulge your flesh, this is what I want, or freedom to serve each other.
If I'm using freedom to, 1 Peter 2, to cover up evil, if I'm using freedom in that way, is it really true freedom? Our freedom is actually stripped from us. It's the lack of boundaries that steal our freedom.
In all of the good times and even the trials, through tears and through laughter, yeah, I know that I'll smile when I think of you. Smile for the things you do. Smile, God gave me you. You are the reason I smile. Yeah.
This is Behind Our Smiles.
Pursuing connection.
And finding joy.
Even in the struggle.
Welcome back to another episode of the Behind Our Smiles podcast. We are Joe and Tara Buchanan. We're so glad that you're here.
It's going to be a good day today,
Yes.
Joe. And what makes it a good day is when we hear from you, our listeners. And today we're hearing from Nancy talking about her husband, Joe. And she wanted to share with us what made her smile when she thinks about her husband. So Nancy says, I love to smile at Joe's amazing laugh. It takes over his whole body and then those dimples. His laugh is infectious, whether we're with friends, grandkids, or especially when he's telling a story. I can't help but laugh and smile.
And I happen to know Joe and Nancy personally, and I can attest to that.
He can laugh.
He's got a
good.
great laugh, and it is extremely contagious.
See, already that just made me smile today, just thinking about that, the simple things, and how we find so much joy, even just seeing our spouse have that same joy.
Thanks for sharing that, Nancy. And if you want to share what makes you smile about your husband or wife, it's really easy. All you have to do is email us, Tara, T-A-R-A, at behindoursmiles.com.
So this time of year, we've heard a lot of things about freedom, and we have our country's Independence Day and all the freedom talk. But I think we're talking about marriages, and especially, our family, our son is getting married. There is this idea or this myth that once you get married, all your freedom's gone. Goodbye, freedom. And it's kind of like halfway serious, halfway joking, going, okay, do we really lose all of our freedom?
So what do you think, Tara?
When we're in marriage.
Did we lose? Do you feel like you lost? I'm just kind of looking at the look on your face as you're saying that. And
So I'm going to answer the way I always answer.
All right.
Yes and no. That's my favorite way to answer every question is yes and no.
Then I'm happy and sad for you.
Yes. So I think, it does feel a little cringy sometimes when we talk about this idea of you're going to lose your freedom. I mean, I think it's just inherently like, ew, I don't want to lose my freedom. Like we all value that sense of freedom. But in reality, when we get married and we make vows, we are binding ourselves and we do say, I'm going to give up my freedom for you. So Joe, as you as a husband, how have you given up all of your freedom for me? Or have you?
Yes. Like you said, there is a binding that happens and you're making a decision to basically live for someone else. And then you have kids and you throw a whole nother element into that. So I would say, yes, I definitely gave up my freedoms, but I would gladly trade them for the reward, right? The benefits of marriage have been absolutely awesome.
Because you mentioned taking care of someone else too. So you can't just do anything you want. So can you think in your mind even what you would do differently if you weren't married? Like, because I'm married, I can't do this anymore. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but no, in theory...
27 years into marriage makes it a lot more difficult to think about what our lives would be like without marriage.
Yes.
And I mean, would I maybe watch more TV? Maybe I would, but the problem is in that time that I'm living out my freedom, I'm longing for this.
Yes.
So it's like, I would much rather be here.
It's all about freedom to do what? So I mean, obviously as our married people, we are not free to pursue other people and we have to become faithful to one person. I'm technically not free to just leave you. I mean, people do and you can, but like that's what the covenant is I'm going to say, I will not leave you. And I mean, think about the vows that you take and we hear them and we repeat them and we understand them, but they really are so binding. And I think, Joan, you and I have read a lot of Chesterton and this idea that, you make a promise, you make a vow, you're making an appointment with yourself in the future.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, 20 years in the future, I pick this person.
Yeah.
30 years in the future, I pick you.
Right. And I look back at, how young we were when we got married, and I'm like, how in the world did you making a decision for your future self? You're making a commitment that you have, what in the world did I know?
I mean, even and this is going to sound weird, but at the time you get married, this is the person, but you're saying, hey, if 10 years from now, a better person comes along, I'm saying no way. You've made the decision, not just for now, but in 5 and 10 and 15 and perhaps 50 and 60 years later. So I think there is that binding. We are choosing to eliminate choices. How about that?
I like back to what you were saying about faithfulness, and that we have given up the freedom to pursue others. And I think back to you mentioned Chesterton, and one of his quotes was that I really like. And surely a man is free to put his hand in a fire, but he is not free of the painful consequence of doing so. And so I think we still have freedom to do really whatever we want, but there are real consequences when you've made a commitment.
Well, and one thing is for me, I might go, or just me, an average person, I want to do what I want, right? I think to myself, freedom is saying I can do what I want, when I want to do it. I don't have to consider anyone else's needs or desires. And say, okay, that's freedom. But yet also I look at you, and I say you in terms of anybody in my life, and I'll say, well, you can't do whatever you want. I want you to take care of me, and I want you. So it's we want to bind the other. I want to say, you can't have the freedom. But that's the catch. So if I'm free and you're free, but marriage kind of says, okay, we're both going to be free inside of this wall of covenant and inside this wall of promise that we've made. But yeah, I don't think anyone says to someone else, we say to people, oh, do whatever you want. It's we never really completely feel that way. It's
Right.
We don't want the other person to be completely free, because if they're completely free, they'll do the wrong thing and they'll hurt you and they'll mess it up somehow.
It's something I've thought about throughout the years often is it really even true freedom without boundaries?
Right.
If there aren't any
It's
boundaries.
not. Again, the consequences are still there. And again, you want the other person to have boundaries.
Right. And I do believe there's security in those boundaries that make the freedom more free. Where if we didn't have boundaries, it would be so chaotic, we wouldn't want the freedom. At least I don't believe I would want the freedom if it was completely chaotic.
I think there's times where I've had complete freedom in different elements, and it does not feel good sometimes. Even think to yourself of a all-you-can-eat buffet. Now, you don't like all-you-can-eat buffets, but if you're at an all-you-can-eat buffet, you have that freedom. You can get as much as you want of whatever you want to some level. Every type of food group is there. But yet I'm going, I don't like it. It's almost too much. I'm I don't know. Sometimes that much freedom to have that many choices and say, do whatever you want. You go, I don't know if I want that much freedom.
Well, and it's interesting that some of the things, to have freedom in everything, in essence, is nothing, right? That people want gatekeepers, and they want help in making those decisions when you have access to
narrow it down.
Yes, narrow it down. Because I do think it comes back to boundaries and how boundaries help solidify and make the freedom actually more free. It's interesting.
Because complete freedom, you think about a baby. When we had babies, there's an element of babies most love, this idea of being swaddled, right? Or somehow being contained. And there's a safety in that if you just let them lay with their little limbs flying, there's a little bit of discomfort. I don't know where I'm going, versus someone's holding me. And so even though binding sounds scary or wrong, the binding part going, I find it feels comfortable. I'm all together. I'm not falling apart. Everything's secured and attached the way it should be.
And that's where I think it comes back to security. And I think having security and freedom is when it becomes real, true freedom for me anyway. And I think that is true across the board.
So I think in our marriage, we all our freedom for different things. But throughout the years, I think freedom's been an issue. The concept of freedom, of saying I want to be able to do what I want, but also obviously we've made a covenant. Because of your past, Joe, and the way you grew up, you seem to have a heightened need for the concept of freedom. You would have said, when you were younger, just dreaming, right, of, I want to be free. What did that feel like as a kid? What in your mind? What was freedom as a kid?
Having access to be able to voice what I was feeling and having an opinion and being able to say this isn't right, being able to get free of the abusive situations that I was in, getting free in the sense of no longer being bound to those things.
You were bound to the wrong things.
Correct.
Yes, you were trapped in the wrong places.
And having freedom, quote unquote, to make those decisions to say, I am separating myself from this. I wasn't capable. I wasn't allowed to make those decisions.
Because you had a lot of parameters and choices you could make for yourself as a child, as a teenager. So maybe even as a teenager, what did freedom look like to you? Almost like when I am free, I am going to do what?
Get in the car and drive until I can't drive anymore, right?
No, driving is a big deal.
Yes.
Because what does driving represent?
Freedom.
Yeah.
I was going to get as far away from those abusive situations as I could. And I think I had all these ideas, like I'm never going to sleep, right? I'm going to stay up all night. I'm going to go and go to the movie theater and watch as many movies as I want.
Get as many boxes of candy.
And a lot of that was really escapism, right? It was escaping the things that I didn't want to deal with or didn't want to feel. But I think for me, I was going to eat as much ice cream, just as much fun food and all this stuff that I could possibly do. And I was going to surround myself with people who weren't cruel to me. I was going to put myself, in fact, in some situations that freedom looked like to me, I wasn't going to be around anybody. I was just going to be all by myself.
Right, because that is a safer place to some level, right? There's more security when there's not people involved and they're making poor choices. And I think when you were able to share that with me in our marriage, I didn't realize how much it affected you, because I grew up definitely feeling I had a healthy amount of freedom. Obviously, I had a good amount of rules in my family, good amount of parameters, but like I was able to pursue the things I wanted to pursue. I could have friends with I wanted to be friends with. I could even say, no, I don't want to do that. So I really did feel a sense of basic autonomy as a young person growing up. So I never really struggled with that feeling of I just want to get, be free. I mean, healthy amounts of as an adult, like we can do this on our own and I want to do it by myself and I want to be independent. But I didn't feel that same sense of someone, suffocating you versus binding, right? There's binding, safe binding, then there's suffocation. But when you're able to explain that to me, it helped a lot, because what was happening in our marriage is this, you were sensitive to going, wait a minute, am I being told what to do? Am I losing my ability to say, I don't want to do this? And I didn't realize for so many years how easily that button of yours was pushed. Just to say, no, you can't pick. I'm going to tell you what you're going to eat tonight, and too bad. And it was like, but I want to be able to say yes instead of being told what to do.
And that's a work that God had to do in me a lot, because I do think I was always good with whatever decision. I just wanted to know I had a choice.
Right.
Once I knew I had a choice, then the pressure would come off. It was in those times that I really felt like I did not have a choice, that I really felt trapped. And I think that's probably human nature on some level. It was really made worse by the traumatic things that I walked through as a child.
Because that's happened, I think, in our conversations too. Like, hey, let's this, that. And I think we noticed that the minute I kind of said, you don't have a choice here. You're going to do this, or we're going to say this, or we're going to make this decision. And regardless of how you're feeling, that's when you kind of the most triggered of going, oh, I'm feeling like my walls are closing in and I don't have freedom. But me making that adjustment, or learning to make that adjustment together too, to go, okay, I've got to give him an out. He's always got to be able to say no, just to any little thing. I mean, I don't care if it's just you want to go upstairs and get a sweater. You have the right to say no. If you say no, I don't want to. It's like, okay, that's all right. Versus you have to. And so I think that part of freedom was very important to say. My husband has to have the ability to say no. I have the ability to say no. To say yes. Do I have a choice in this or not?
Right.
Do I have a choice or not? And that's a scary place to be if you go, I don't have a choice at all? Like, then who's free and who's not free?
And sometimes I think it's presented in a way that there is no choice, even though there may be a choice. And I think sometimes that was triggering for me as well. And so we began to learn to communicate a lot better on that, where I would literally just say, do I have a choice in this?
Yeah.
Or I feel like you're telling me what to do.
Yeah.
And I'm okay on some level. Like, if this needs to get done, Joe, I really need your help here.
Right.
Can you do this? I have no problem with that. I think the being asked to help,
right, versus being told.
as being told to help, I think is a difference. And I think you and I also notice that there are seasons where You can tell me what to do maybe 10 times in a row. And then the 11th time I go, wait a minute, is this, do I have a choice in this, or is this something? Because there are times when, our child is in danger, or this is happening, or that is happening. And we just have to be able to tell each other, I need you to do this. You need to do this. So,
but I think with the freedom part comes back to this. I need to let my husband be free. Like, I can't just say freedom for myself, saying, hey, let me do what I want. Like, can I really say to myself, my husband can, have his own autonomy. So we know that we're free to have your own opinions. You're free to disagree with me. You're free to have different feelings than me. And so I think for sometimes that's what the lack of freedom was. Not so much in like what you have to do or you have to go here, but I think sometimes the lack of freedom was, I don't have the freedom to disagree with you. I don't have the freedom to say that's not how I'm feeling. Like, well, don't you feel this way? And this is how it is. Like, nope, I don't feel that way. And I go, well, I think there's that undercurrent of like, I'm going to tell you how to feel. And I think that was just as triggering for you as is for me to go, why are you telling me how I should feel? Like, that's the most basic area of freedom there is.
And I think that was probably the most difficult in all of this to work through. And I think I was able to finally figure out, it sounds so weird, like why in the world can't you figure these things out? But I think
we're humans, and
it's time, and there's a healing process that happens in that. But when we're able to ask each other, are you telling me how to feel? Are you telling me how I should feel? Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute. No, that's not what I was intending. Or yes, that's what I was intending. And then we're able to work through that and talk through that. But I think once I began to feel like I had a voice, and I think the same is true with anybody, once we feel like we have a voice, I believe that begins to change the conversation.
Well, a couple weeks ago, our episode was you should, right? You should do this. So a million situations a day that I say you should do this, but that freedom element comes into saying, if I say he should do this and he thinks he doesn't need to, then he's free to disagree with me. Like, he's free to say, I'm not going to do it that way. And I'm like, but why aren't you doing it that way? And I've noticed in my heart that inhibition or that not willingness to let go. But if he has a different opinion, it's okay. I have to let him have some opinion, because I know for myself that if you're telling me what my opinion should be, I'm going, nope, that's not my opinion. So back to freedom, though. So you have freedom to have your own opinion and freedom all this. And I want to be able to think what I want and do what I want. But even with the fact that we've made a covenant, Joe, and we have bound ourselves to each other in marriage, we still have to choose to love each other. And it's still a choice we make each day. It's not like I'm not loving you and staying married to you just because I have to, or just because I made a vow. True.
Although the promise, there is a security in that promise, right?
Yes.
That even when we don't feel like it, we still stay with the promise. But you're exactly right. I don't want you to love me because I tell you should love me.
Right.
That to me, I don't know that I would feel loved. I want you to choose to be bound to me, to choose daily to say, I love you. I've made this commitment. I'm choosing to love you.
But that obligation piece, obviously, I've obliged myself, right? It's like I made a promise with myself, right? I always wonder that. Is the vow I make a promise to you or a promise to myself? It's almost a promise to myself. Like, don't forget, Tara, you told yourself that you would do this, that you would love this man forever. So later, I've bound myself to that. But yet, when it comes to showing that love to you, it's still a choice made out of love and not just, well, I'm staying married to you because I said I would. There's more to this than like fulfilling a promise. It is also I staying faithful to you because I said I would, and it's what I want to do. And I want to do it versus, well, I really'd rather leave you, but since I said I wouldn't, I won't. And it's like, okay, that's not like what we're both looking for.
No, but I think in those moments where we have weakness or life is hard or whatever, the promise does come in to be a very vital part of that. But back to what you're saying, I think you're absolutely right. I think, and I do believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, because I've seen it, the feeling chases the behavior. So out of the commitment to say, I am committed to you, Tara, for the rest of my life, I've made a promise with myself. Way back when I didn't know what I was doing, I made a promise with myself, right? In theory, I was young. I'm going to stand true to that promise. And by staying committed to that promise, that's when the feeling, like, now because I'm committed to this, what follows is this desire to want to be committed to this. Now I love you because I'm choosing to love you. But I think the promise is what holds it all together in those seasons when everything's pulling at it.
I guess what I'm thinking is the other end of like, I don't love you because I said I would, even though that's good. But I'm also thinking the opposite thing, which is I can't force you to love me either. So again, I don't want, like if I'm going, well, honey, stop at the store and give me flowers, and you do. It's like there's not that that's a situation we have necessarily, but like the love you give me, I know you have to be giving it to me freely. I can't force you to love me, or I can't force you, right? I mean, that's not love.
Yeah.
I go, love me or do this for me. It's like, that's not love. Like you still have to say, honey, I want you to freely give it out of your heart.
No, and that's
out of
true.
Your commitment as well.
Right.
Than just going, he's here because I told him to do it.
Right. Is that back to this idea of we want, as humans, others to read our minds, right? We want to have that, I want you to give me flowers because you chose to give me flowers, but I really want flowers. So I shouldn't have to tell you, but that I really want flowers. No, it does come down. But I do come back to the idea of the promise being a vital part. I have made a commitment to say, Tara, to the best of my ability, in whatever season I'm in, I'm going to love you, right? I'm going to love you with everything that I have to the best of my ability. And hopefully that increases over time. But there are times within a marriage where I may not feel like so that's what the promise is for. But I do believe in staying committed to the promise to say, between you and God, I'm going to stay honorable in this relationship and I'm going to choose to love you to the best of my ability. I do think that I'm going to be able to express a much greater capacity to say, I love you because I choose to love you as a result of that. Where if there was no commitment, I'm not sure that would stay forever.
Right. But we have to have the freedom to choose.
Yes.
And even as individuals in a marriage, we still have the freedom to choose what we do and how we behave and using those choices for good. So it's back to our picture of our boundaries and no freedom or no freedom. And I think about, Christianity and what Jesus offers us in terms of saying, I want to give you freedom, right? Okay, with freedom, and you know the truth, and the truth will set you free, but still going, what does that really mean? Like this idea of freedom, but yet there's a rule and order. And one more quote from Chesterton, because I think he nails this a little better. He goes, I found that the more I consider Christianity, the more I found that while it had established a rule and order, the chief aim of that order was to give room for good things to run wild. I was like, that's, I think, such a great picture of freedom. Like, okay, God's saying, hey, I want you to be free. God says to us, I'm giving you free will. You need to make a choice. This is not something I'm forcing you to do. I'm not forcing you to love me. But I'm going to put some boundaries in place to say, when you're free, this is what it's going to look like. But I want the good things to run wild within that. And I thought that's a beautiful place because it doesn't want an evil running in those free. Again, freedom, if on our own, we are going to choose evil.
Well, we're going to choose things that are going to hurt us.
Right.
Inadvertently. We think, I want to eat ice cream. I want to be free to eat ice cream. But if I eat only ice cream every day, that's going to hurt me over time. It's going to be very detrimental to my development and my well-being. So there has to be boundaries in place to keep us within the safety spot, right? Within the safety zone. However, within those boundaries, I love what Chesterton said, because there is incredible freedom to run wild. And in that running wild, there's this birthing of like a deeper capacity to love, right? There's more of it is birthed out of us because within the boundaries, we are free within true freedom to make that decision to say, I choose to love you. I choose to love you. And I think out of that, God grows that capacity of love.
Well, and the catch with the freedom, and we talk about this when you're raising kids and teenagers, right? Because again, as kids and teenagers, we want more and more freedom. That's, again, whether you're in a really rough spot like you were or if not, we want freedom. But we keep forgetting, hey, with freedom comes responsibility.
Yeah.
It goes back to like when the kids need the driver's license, because your driver's license in your car represents all that freedom, but to go, no, it's not a freedom. It is a responsibility of what you have to do. So we go back to this concept, Joe, that you and I have talked about a lot, which is your freedom for what? You're free for what? For why? And for me, it comes down to that verse that we've read quite a bit in Galatians 5. We are called to be free, but don't use your freedom to indulge the flesh. You can use your freedom in a wrong way to indulge your flesh. This is what I want, or freedom to serve each other.
If I'm using freedom to indulge the flesh, or like in, what is it, 1 Peter 2, to cover up evil. If I'm using freedom in that way, is it really true freedom? Our freedom is actually stripped from us. But it's a lack of boundaries that steal our freedom. So it's that boundary that gives structure, if you will, to the incredible freedom that God has given us.
So last, Joe, I'll ask you.
My brain's hurt, by
This
the
is
way.
kind of a deep question. So this is not even a question I have an immediate answer to. But, we all want the idea of freedom, or as we think of freedom, right? Freedom, like for you, means getting in a car and going, or whatever it is for you that you go, this is when I would know I'm free. But yet we all know that there's times we're free and we're not free, right? We're still bound in our head with things that come after us. But how do we kind of know or get that true level of freedom from ourselves even? Like when we know that because we're chasing it, like freedom, we're almost always chasing it. Like, oh, if I do this, I'll feel free. And sometimes we think we're free and we're not free because we're still enslaved by our selfish desires, right? We're enslaved by our sinful desires, and we're not truly free, Well,
I think you answered the question.
I'm thinking.
I think that is the question. When we're not enslaved to the things around us that would hinder us and hold us down. I believe that's in Isaiah, right? Or what? No, that's what Paul said, right? In Galatians, we break free of the things that hinder us and weigh us down. And I think that's exactly right. I think the more that I chase freedom for selfish desires, the more that I end up in bondage. I end up enslaved. Where when I can release it to say, God, what do you want me to do? And I'm still figuring this out. It's a lifetime process. I don't have this figured out. But when I'm able to get to a place where I say, God, how do I love those around me, truly love them, truly serve them, and be free in the way you want me to be free, that's when I find true freedom. But many times I notice that freedom is packaged in boundaries, and that boundary spells security. And in true security, I'm able to find true freedom. If I'm worried about my safety, I'm not free. Does it make sense?
Because that worry is the opposite. I think, and then back to the surrender piece, because our selfish human freedom is, I'll feel free when I can do whatever I want. Okay, so that me temporarily thinking that would feel good. But kind of going, I think the opposite is true freedom and surrender to God. Like, God, I'm okay with whatever you want. And I think that's where you begin to feel free, saying, you know what? I know that is where I'll find happiness and contentment, is when I go, God will do what he wants and I can trust him completely. Then there's a freedom with there to go, he's got this. And I want to align my will with his, and I don't want to, so I think it comes together in those pieces there of almost letting go, then taking up.
I'll give a quick example when it something like finances within a marriage relationship. When we have had seasons of our lives where we weren't operating under the idea of a budget, you could say you're more free.
Right,
you have money and you can do it.
Yeah, do whatever you want.
But oh my goodness, there was so much more anxiety. I mean, a car repair would come up or something to come up, and it would really steal our joy, and it would make us feel anxious and worried. But when we're operating within the structure confines of a budget, all of a sudden there's incredible joy in that, in living your life in that way. And there is freedom, because if a car repair comes up, you don't worry about it because it's in the budget, or if this comes up, it's in the budget. So I think that's a great example of a small example, if nothing else, of how freedom within structure does produce true joy and lowers anxiety and worry and those things that would enslave us, and gives us true freedom.
Yeah, so I like that we're bound together, Joe, and we're free within this beautiful little, covenant of love that we've chosen, with these very, very strong walls around us and very, very clear boundaries. But within those boundaries, the good things in our marriage can run wild.
Yeah.
Right? They can run wild because we know exactly, we're not going to accidentally fall off the cliff. We know we're going to be great within this beautiful covenant. So thanks for being so free with me.
I appreciate that too. And I love that we can have podcast episodes like this where we can kind of work it out.
Ooh, this is
we kind of knew where we were going. You always work out a great outline for each episode, but it's fun to go back and really think about this. So going into this episode, when we began to talk this out before we recorded, I really thought
You knew what you're
I
talking
kind of
about?
had an idea where I
wait.
was going, and as we've done the episode, I'm even going, wow, okay, I need to revisit that, or I need to rethink about that. But I do think it comes back to, and I do believe this to be true, real in that binding that you just talked about is where true freedom is found.
And I guess I would say last is I have to give you as much freedom as I want myself. Because again, it's too easy to say I want all the freedom in the relationship and not you. And that's not freedom either. So mutually saying, I'm going to use my freedom to serve you. And I'm going to mutually receive the love that you choose to give to me. But we bound ourselves, but I still enjoy you choosing to love me rather than me like making you love me in such a way. So yeah, it's been a good conversation. A lot of freedom talk, but I'm happy that we are free.
And I'd love to hear from you if you have thoughts, maybe
you
some
have
ideas.
thoughts?
Well, just on freedom as a whole. As
We're
you
not sure if you have
listen
thoughts
to,
or not.
you're like, hey, I would have thrown this in, or I would have thrown that in. Please email us.
Sorry.
Would love to hear from you, Tara at behindoursmiles.com. You can also
you are free to respond if you'd like to.
Instagram. Where are we at on Instagram again?
Behind Our Smiles Pod, and on Facebook, Behind Our Smiles.
Just Behind Our Smiles. Sorry.
That's it. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you for hanging out with us today. We really appreciate it. You're free to join us every single week.
We are.
And we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Behind Our Smiles is a Wow God production, a ministry of the University of Northwestern St. Paul. Discover more at wowgod.com.